Hi, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? This isn't too loud. All right. I'm Tara Bray, and this is the first actual reading I've had from this book. So I'm really excited about it. So I'm really glad you could be here. And I'll start with just the first poem of the collection. Christopher will know this. I love birds, and this is a poem, I guess when I first kind of got into birds, most of the birds I knew were feeder birds, and this little bird is so common, but to me it wasn't at the time because when I lived in Georgia, I was kind of clueless about birds. I never even noticed them. It's about the chickadee, and it's just so cute. And so anyway, here's my poem, Carolina Chickadees. Another moment struck by the shenanigans of the chickadees, their songs, pert shavings of glee, the dart of their tight round bodies dressed in a clean contrast, black on white, little skunk joys, little wing-beat whippets my palm hungers for instinctively, pulses pinging from trees to the feeder, back and again, until the spare appetite we assign to their tiny beaks seems another sham believed into simile. They whip and dip, sled quick slopes of air, and I plead to feel them beat upon my ear, chatter, tease me, meek cheek fires I want to swallow whole. The next poem, especially for you student writers, I actually wrote when I was in my 20s, and 20 years later, it's in this collection. So it's a little bit long, but I'm going to read it because I wrote it when I was pretty young. And the first section of this book deals with my mother's death. And so I wanted to read a few poems from that section just to kind of give you, a little bit of a glimpse at the work as kind of a whole. And this is called The Preparation. Go to the woman whose mother died young. She can tell you the downfall of self-sufficiency. Take your worst day, move everything under it. Your heavens will be gray with the smog of toil. Or if it's her determined jaw you want, take the file, begin edging off your own bone, your arms growing hard, angled, your eyes setting themselves deeply for the kill. This is the preparation. It is not like the hunter dousing his skin with urine, nor the thief pulling the black shirt over his body. You need not pack provisions nor send up prayers while you offer yourself broken, whispering a beggar's song. I tell you, nothing prepares you for a mother crumpled on cold tile, gone in seconds on a night you were not home. Imagine yourself untended as the garden behind the empty house. Your clothing will grow small, tattered, and no one will notice. This is the stumbling into loneliness, a girl's knees tearing open. This child you will cling to with tired fingers. How you will hate to pull the woman's voice from your throat. You would rather scrub scum from the bathroom floor barehanded without water. Do you feel what I tell you in the bone dust you are breathing? You will. It will be everything you never asked for. How my mother died. My father shook the gun to get the bullet out. He was a careless man, but only once. I shouldn't linger on this, the road rising out of itself, my father out on Pine Street in the dark, down on all fours, trying to open his face with gravel, trying to get down to the tar of what went wrong by making blood again. They find them there in a dream of twigs thrashing in the heat, every stitch of light withheld. Jesus of the ordinary prayer, lay my father down on a bed of straw and let him bleed his way to light. Give him one sweet hour of oblivion for all of us. He's out there groveling in the glare of suspicion, burrowing in the deep red pit where the lowest sounds are made. He's borrowed his life from brambles that wait to burn. I know the dirt won't hide our family, and the sun's intensity won't take root in the sky, make truth a thing we all can see. So let my father drift away from here, holding your brown feet. Stir your crown of glory into his bleary eyes and sing the untroubled prayer, the warm treason of innocence. Ready us both for the undoing that can't, for the life of him, be undone. And one more along this vein. This is about my brothers. I have 4 brothers, and they're like, I don't know, I talk about my brothers a lot, and so people know this. They're very important to me. Brothers. Brothers shedding funeral clothes with hands that smell of onion grass, then sleeping on stained sheets and pulsing like a creek bubbling with rain. Brothers walking home with river feet. Brothers at their sister's neck like sun. Brothers of the fields picking thorns from legs, small limbs sprinkled with faint ticks of blood. Brothers hearing gunshots in the sky. Brothers standing still to watch the blue jays stab a cake of suet in a cage. Blood boys alive as 2 peppers ripe in the hand. Brothers sinking when they are alone, brooding in a chair of pine, each seat a glossy mother heart. Brothers swimming in a ditch when things get bad, stink on stink in the cool relief of mud froth, the ruin of stinking rain. Brothers of the aftermath, tussling under dirty southern trees, boys serving as disciples of the crass. The soaked red dirt, the lovely violence, dreaming up the light of goldenrod at night. Brothers blazing as they weep, making mothers from women they half know. Brothers singing songs their father taught, songs of summer dust and bean hulls rotting in a paper bag. So when I started this collection, I thought it was basically going to be about my mother dying when I was 13. But the more I wrote, the more the natural world kind of took me over, and it started with the birds, and then it moved and kind of on from that. So as this collection kind of evolved, a lot of the poems about my mother's death dropped away, and I kind of feel like Mother Nature kind of came in, and so you can kind of see this transformation coming. So I'm going to read, I'm probably not going to stop too much. I'll read a few more, but this is kind of one of the first poems I wrote along that vein, and it's called Sabbath. And it's not about my mother, but anyway. Sabbath. The day you left, the marsh grass stopped me cold. I wanted to comb it, but really I wanted my fingers to bleed. It was the season I saw 3 pelicans dip back their heads, let the fish fall to orange light. Certainly they couldn't stand to swallow. I knew the intensity of pulling in the throat, that pained rippling of flesh forced down, and how it weighs and weighs. When you left, I wanted to home in on just one bird, know it the way I know my own mouth's taste, the taste that stays and stays. But the birds, dozens, took me by surprise, so many unfamiliars, a vibrato of wingspans and offbeat songs. Come out of the margins, the songs cried. Flight is not enough. I'd grown accustomed to being the dry, distant thing who wanted to sneak up on the real, to fabricate the wisdom of feathers and footholds. In time I grew simple and small, and the heron looked at me once and did not flee. I learned to go to the fields and lie down among the cattails leaning, the goldfinches double dipping in flight, my face at rest and washed with sky. The title of this poem comes from a Buddhist kind of meditation saying that you can meditate on while you're meditating, you can kind of think on. And the saying is, I love what comes, I love what goes. The startle of ice, a cloister barn of small town fear, Spanish lavender that thrives, sunken rabbit tracks gone hard in snow, neighbor light elsewhere, backyard grief, the posture of a cold wren, fir needles that when broken smell of tangerine, the itch of chickadee claws on skin, fluency and doddering, sanctity of pen, of edge, of neat prayers, the insanity of wheat. To Ruthie Harper, the girl from 3rd grade who comes to me in dreams. You've rambled in my head all these years, your round face and wiry hair, my guilt caught up in those blonde strands. You walk to school bragging on the Holy Ghost who bit your neck while you dance for him in a church I'd never see, a church tucked back in woods out on Jakin Road. No, my daddy said, those roads out there are tangles in the dark. You cried for me, swore I'd burn in worthless fields. I'd call the girls to steal your Barbie dolls in tattered clothes, their crayon-marked arms hollow, their hair rugged as your own. We'd rip them from your hands, tearing limb from plastic limb before we buried them, marking their graves with stones. And still you smiled. We didn't understand the scriptures you sang out as we dug for the deeper dirt of our burial ground. Your face seems almost pretty looking back. In dreams sometimes you come to me, walking fields of brown, wearing that paisley dress hanging loose as skin behind the arm of an old woman who is always there. She turns the soil, pulling out lemon rinds, a patent leather shoe with a buckle and a strap, the kind your mama made you wear when you were much too old. We mocked your mama with her broken teeth. Still, there was always your defense, your smile, the sound of verses on your tongue, drifting down to calm me after all these years. In my dream, I'm walking into your mouth. It's soft. I'm sitting down and suddenly I'm sleeping there inside your complicated grace. On starlings. How seriously can I take these speckled scoundrels that bicker on a branch all morning long? It's with a kind of jubilee they scrap and scour for their share. Though I can't help but feel affinity for the fussy bills that hound their own breed. Yesterday I sat in judgments of the squawks that rage, as if the pleasure of this world is argument. Ill-willed, they're nothing like the junco. The darling at my feet are now a nervous joy who wears unknowingly a tiny mustache made of snow. Long ago I heard starlings were the ugly birds, and so stood shocked to see the gleam of them, smoothed down and touched with flecks of temple fire. Should I turn from their beauty too frantic and difficult to believe? No, I'll take the crabby hearts in hand. Let them have their ungodly temperaments, tree tempests, dazzlers, knuckle-headed saints. No explanation. I wish there were something of the world I could explain today, like the way my father used to scratch circles on a stone inside a box to call a turkey, how he'd practice hours, failing to match his handmade yelping to that of a bird he never saw. Or better yet, how my neighbor with the broken body weaves, her white hair flat against her head, the brown patches of scalp showing through. If only I could name each small part of her loom, describe the tools gleaming in blue hands, make good use of words like weft and warp, then build a phrase for the way her fingertips will trail beyond her last slow days of work. But the world's so far away I can't get to the fire of landscape, the birds minding their own lives, the wild urge of a day spent rambling blindly past the coyote's blur. I want to kneel again, walk the woods and scoop the earth's honey, take a breath strong into a thread of amber. Instead, I'm making do with sleep and an old brown dog on the doorstep, his eyes the almost green of a dirty sea. Rain. Like a dark miracle, they sleep. 2 a.m. at a truck stop outside Indianapolis. My husband of 3 cities, 3 years. Flycatcher, scrub jay, kingfisher. Our baby daughter, little chickadee, pale wrinkle, my inkling. A motherless girl who now mothers. I am loved twice, 2 orchids, 2 glimpses of the afterlife, 2 clear-winged butterflies, 2 fox sightings, twice scraped, twice owned. A cold rain splatters into neon and the random chill of truck light, while my husband breathes slowly, as he does everything, his lips full and parted. We are a family of flight, tracing the hunger of this country, half ravished and heading home to Georgia, as the world calls us to sleep. staring at my staring at my husband's hands of clarity, skin smoother than mine. I am trespassing into a field of orphan lilies brushed with sun. Am given 2 smooth stones crushed by a blessing. I have forgotten my sister, the dark-eyed junco. There is only night, rain, husband, babe, and sleep. This black string of small good things. We are not young parents, but this moment contains a visible trace of newness, shielded, like my daughter's eyes, though shut, a light with the color of sky and earth. Praise her intent awakening, praise her sleep, praise the rain's joyful tapping, again for grace. When I was in grad school, a lot of the women there of all ages were really into crocheting and knitting, and I think it's kind of coming back as an art. And a lot of them were really young, and we actually went to a poet's reading, and she talked about how odd it is that she had seen someone in the library crocheting, and we were all kind of sitting there laughing because most everybody that we knew crocheted. We would actually meet and knit and crochet. And so this poem is called Crocheting. At first, in twitches too quick for hope, her slender needle flits into the soft loop sigh of yarn, lifts off as if a bird jarred awake, that hot-ironed evangelist of flight who whips her feather robes and flees. Bearing the sharp gleam of the needle's craft, she serves its touch, the needle leaning in, pulsing like the living do, and she becomes a simple slip, a twist, an even breath. Her bloodline sweetening to attention, she remembers why her needle came, for no more than the pattern of its yarn trail sauntering into the piney room of sleep, while the ghost of it wakes into 1,000 rings of fire. At last she finds the plainest way and makes one stitch, one concentrated stitch. And my teacher in grad school told me that the one stitch, one concentrated stitch, he made the connection between that and poetry, because that's kind of what poetry is, when, just that spare kind of repetition, kind of sinking in. I don't know. I thought that was an interesting comparison. I had no idea. I didn't mean to do that, but that he made that connection. The next poem comes from one of my favorite places in the world, which is in Nevada. And I had a job in Carson City, and we lived in Reno, and every day, it was about a 40-minute drive, and I would get to drive through this valley. It's called Washoe Valley, and it's right near Mount Rose, which is the mountain that is above Lake Tahoe. And there was a bird refuge in that valley. So there are several poems in here about that bird refuge where I spent a lot of time. Sometimes I would stop on the way to work or the way home from work and hang out there and just watch the birds. So this poem is called Washoe Lake Bird Refuge Revisited, and only revisited because there's an earlier poem about that bird refuge that I'm not going to read. So here we go. Washoe Lake Bird Refuge Revisited. Today the birds provide no solace, the ibis standing lock-kneed, looking off disinterested, the night heron barking as it flees, one marsh wren so jittery it blurs full time. Days like this my every prayer's half here, my hard-fruited presence gone too soft, its edges spoiled by fog and hours. Wandering all moss and stupor, I dream the fence posts damp, drum up finches making hymns from sky and threads of air. Then I spot a coyote in the sedge. We catch eyes. He stops short, turns, sprints across the field, stops, looks back. Then he's off again until he parts the distant grass, drops back to a prance that is so purely wild and light, I feel my every hair ablaze and lifting. The world, now tight-grained like silk rippling with sun, I've been claimed, woken up, taken back again. The August hills skinned beneath the plum light of the sky, the birds reborn, and everywhere their song strung tight around the breath. I'm going to read a few newer poems and then end with a few from the book. I didn't really realize how many chickadees there are. There are a lot of other birds besides chickadees, but they keep popping up in today's reading. But when you would go on Mount Rose, a lot of times we go there in snowshoe, and it was pretty amazing because if you had a granola bar, the chickadees would come down and land in your hands and they would eat. And we started taking bird food up there, and we would just hold out our hands, and tons of birds would come and feed in our hands. And then we took our camera and we put them like bird seed all on our heads, and chickadees would just land and would take these pictures like we were some kind of special people. But it was just amazing to me. So not like within a few years of not even knowing what a chickadee was, I was actually feeding one. So that is mentioned in here, and so I just wanted to say it was real. It's really true. This is called No Wisdom. She swears by the dirt flavor of field peas, the dazzle of purple hulls torn open, bared. She is tired of waking, lusts for a smooth knob of arrogance in her hand, keeps quiet because she's never seen a barn owl in the wild, its empty face clean and speechless. And she's come this far without bobolinks. In her world, smallness is a given, and her affection for one fleck of leaf in her husband's beard. His claims of no wisdom a terror, may as well have damned birdsong, held little beaks over flames. But then she remembers late afternoon in woods with a smell like no other, the way the high air hurt, and the chickadee, winter-starved on the mountain, that flew down, left light scratchings in her hand. Walking Calvin College Nature Study Area. My baby wrapped against me, I walked the woods each morning on these seminary grounds, land set off for those called to study, watch, regain the wilderness of prayer. Thank God it's open to the public. My girl points up, hand bobbing while we move. She babbles through the trees, her song tangling among the blackbird's rant, the cluttered and decaying air. We walk up on a student who stands so still, almost contained beneath her reckless hair. What made her turn from the fires of youth for a plainer way? Outcast or something holy, rebellion or sincerity? She doesn't break her downward gaze. Before her, a turtle plods across the breaking leaves. I stop, feel the blaze as if yoked in a moment of pain or something deeper. Her red hair seems so worthy, the turtle large and meant for water. The woman is not pretty, but beauty burns along the edge of her. The world is lost, my baby oblivious and whole, the turtle ambling on. Unknowingly, my daughter waves. The woman breaks her pause, smiles back. There are the trees, the lack of light, a shy gathering, nothing to be. History. There's a smell to my daughter's sleep akin to South Georgia's well-worn soil, heat, its miles of flatland, scattered pine woods. All morning, my husband crouched into the bathroom sink where a hose had burst and failed to force the water off. Like my father, except he seethed quietly amidst the clanging where my father raged us all awake. I fold my daughter's socks. They are so small. My husband needs tending. He is finite, such a contrast to her endlessness, and hard. She can't get enough of him. Sometimes on our strolls, the wild turkeys, dark and awkward, pander around the neighbor's yard. Birds, she says, loud enough for them to pull their heads from the grass, turn for the trees. A daughter, like a lute and a warning, a story passed down late into a broken world and homeless. And yet we share the smell of history, an hour when exhaustion's sweet, a world partitioned by sleep and wakefulness. Alas, no one is coming. Alas, no one is coming. We are all forsaken. My prayers bear the smell of pipes. Breeze. In the corner of the house lives a breeze. The girl goes there because the breeze is a force she wants to master, now that she's lost the thrill of measuring the dimensions of rabbit tracks in snow, now that grace is her disaster. She'll trap the breeze with her body, turn it to her advantage, shape it into a breath of lilies, pink mouselings wriggling in the straw, 10 kernels of sweet corn that she'll resist as her mind overlaps with the idea of a river. At what hour did solitude turn so lovely? At what point did the sparrow ride the current into translucence and transcend? And I will end with 2 poems from my collection. is a poem that I wrote in another bird refuge in Utah. And Terry Tempest Williams wrote this book, Refuge, and some of you may be familiar with it. I think some of my students, we read an essay from this book. But anyway, she's going to be at Kalamazoo Valley Community College, which I'm assuming is in Kalamazoo in March. And she is one of my favorite, well, I don't like her later work so much, but her earlier work I really love. And her book, Refuge, is about this bird refuge during a drought that was about to maybe not make it. And so anyway, I wanted to go there. It's fine now. And so I wrote this poem while I was there. American White Pelican Colony. And that's a pelican colony that was actually there. Huge, unbelievable. They come wearing old man faces, bright and washed with sea or something like disaster. They float on the water's tension, their necks elegant, lined with wet fringe, flat eyes unflinching in the glare of noon. The nearest glows like a white-haired monk, quietly devoted after he's given up contemplation, unsung his vows. The sky stripped to blue is clear, nothing ghostly nor vague. Strong shoulders open to a spread of wings, revealing black tips. The swash, the rise, the reptilian flight. Pelicans everywhere, like answers to failed questions, no pangs, at ease. They dip fiery purses to water, scratch their backs with a tip of flame. First sighting of the belted kingfisher. Little swelter of the wet plunge, you leave me daft and trembling in your feather wash, until even the pond water is worthy of ecstasy. Virgin to your flare, I've gone giddy, fluttering into a joy that thrives at the lip of vanishing. Sweet drug of presence, spry little droll, oblique ovo, how do you bear this exuberance? All along you were in me, voiceless and empty, until across the fingers of water you made yourself known. Woman of whispers and omens, empress of impermanence, we are here, now, full up and singing. Thank you. So, I thought if you had any questions, I'd be willing to take a little time to answer them. And if not, you can go ahead and eat your lunch or go wherever you'd like. Yes? Well, I think it's sort of like what I said earlier. I started out writing about my mother's death. And so I started in my 20s just because in my family, oh, and feel free to leave if you need to. But in my family, we were never allowed to talk about it, so I think poetry started as my way of just kind of dealing with that. And then it really shifted after I wrote through a lot of those poems. Some of them were in the collection and they dropped away, and then I just became like really interested in the outside world and the natural world and kind of the relationship between that and the spiritual. So that kind of, a lot of this book, we lived in Nevada, so a lot of the poems took place in the desert or in the Sierras as you move through it. And I went to grad school in the Ozark Mountains, so again, I just felt like I was always landing in these really beautiful places, and so that kind of was the next inspiration. So it's kind of a combination of those. Thanks. Yes? This is my first collection, so I'm in the middle of writing another collection, but I'm probably about halfway through, and who knows what'll drop away and shift from that, but yes. Yes. Oh, well, for a long time it was the bird refuge, and I guess mostly I write at my desk in a coffee shop, which is not very inspiring now, but we live right down the road from the Calvin College Little Nature area, so I like places that are really nearby. I mean, it's great to have places far away that are kind of like outside places. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration. But to me, most of my writing happens in the daily. So I try to find places really close by that I can just kind of incorporate into my daily life to get inspired by. But most of my writing happens probably in coffee shops because I have a 2-year-old and she is very loud and it's hard to get much done at home. But sometimes at home at my desk when she's napping or asleep. Yeah. Yes, Christopher. That's a good question. Sometimes I'm in the moment when things come to me, um, but a lot of times it's reflection. Um, yeah, probably 75% reflection, 25% in the moment. And a lot of times I start with language too. I put interesting words and phrases together, kind of like we did in that activity in class, and then that kind of leads me somewhere. So some of my poems are inspired strictly from language, but not that, I try not to let that happen too often. But yeah, yes. Yeah, that's a good question. For me, most of my writing comes from experience. A lot of my friends, their writing comes strictly from language, completely from language. But I do change things. Like in the one poem I read, songs my father taught, songs of summer dust and beanholes rotting in a paper bag. He never really taught us any songs about beanholes rotting in a paper bag. So it's kind of like I'm working with truth, but I'll shift in terms of images. Like the point is not very happy, not good songs, that I was getting across there. So I will definitely shift the little truths to get at the big truths. But the big truth is still there, writing about your mother's death and how it affected your brothers. That's still there, but some things aren't actually factual. Like, I don't know if my brothers actually made mothers of women they have no. So again, some of it's shifted from exact truth. Yes, Amy. Hmm. Yeah. Well, there is a lot of sky. I think I actually had to cut some of my sky out when I put all my poems together. So I know I have a lot of sky. And actually, originally, see, I've never noticed this, but originally I got called on having a lot of dirt. So it does kind of move that way, but I'm not sure why. Other than, I think it's almost probably, I grew up in the South, and I don't know, early when I was writing in Atlanta, like dirt was so important, but then I moved out west where the sky was so big. So I think it's almost that I kind of do write from experiences or images come from play. I'm really grounded wherever I am. I get into that place, and I think I like the sky is humongous in Nevada, so it just kind of came to me. I don't think I went seeking it or manipulating my language that way, but it probably just happened. Yeah. Well, thank you. Any other questions? All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming today. And like Brent mentioned, the collection is available downstairs in the bookstore. So it's there. You can tell people about it. And thank you so much for coming today. And have a great afternoon.